All right, we are live today, guys, talking about vampires. This is an important one, guys. Why? Because vampires are a mythic creature, and I think 5e. Sure, we got audio, because if we don't have audio, it's all for nothing. All right, checking this. Gonna turn my audio off and back on again. 'Cause it's a little warbly. Okay, let's check that out. I think we're okay. Sounds fine. Stuart's in the house. I think we're good to go. Dirty Socks says sound is okay. Heck yeah. One of these days I'm gonna upgrade my microphone. We're getting to it. We're getting to it. Already have quite a few people in live stream. Welcome everybody. Surfer dudes rolling out. Sounds good. Blue Rose Line in the house. Hello, Blue Rose. It's great to see you as always. So awesome to see everybody. Drop your name in the chat. Let me know who's in the live stream crew today, guys. Guys, I've prepared for this one. Bert's in the house. Hey y'all, how's it going, Bert? Appreciate you being here. Really happy to see everybody. Guys, vampires. I am really excited about this one. Hi y'all, welcome to the live stream. Heck yeah, Dirty Socks, counselor and moderator in the GM Philosophy Discord. If you haven't joined, links in the description. Make sure you join us. We are at just about 600 GM strong, guys. We're growing every single day. I see someone has given me a thumbs up. Heck yeah, give me that thumbs up. Give me that algorithm juice. Let's get this live stream kicking off. Let's make it pop, guys. All right. So here's what we're doing today. Here's the program for the live stream. And I want to hear your comments. I want to hear your hot takes. I want to hear everything you have to say about it. But this is what we're doing today. We're going to start with the 5e, not 5.5. now 2024 is 5.5, but I have the 5e Monster Manual, 2014. We're going to start with that, okay? I've got it ready. We're queued up here, ready to rock and roll, okay? We're going to go over that as a baseline, establishing a baseline. Then we're going to compare it with the 3e, okay? I'm going to admit I wasn't super thrilled with the 3e vampires. In fact, now looking over it, maybe I was a little harsh in my branding about 5e vampires are weak. Maybe they're better than I gave them credit for upon closer inspection. Okay. Here's another thing we're going to do. We're going to compare the 5e vampire to Bram Stoker's Dracula, to the True Blood series, right? Because they're vampires. You got to include True Blood. Underworld. How does 5e measure up to the Underworld vampires? We're going to look at AD&D vampires. We're going to go way back to second edition. We're going to look at 4e vampires. We're going to rate them all. We're going to see how they all measure up in a couple different categorical, forms of measurement. At the end of the day, guys, we're going to find out exactly what the 5e vampire is missing, what it does right, okay? T-Dog says, get to watch this while I'm not driving. Heck yeah. I feel like listening is fine while driving. Watching, a little risky. I've watched some Caleb Hammer financial audit while driving, but I have to be careful not to watch. I'm just listening to him rip into people's personal finances brings me a lot of pleasure. a lot of pleasure. Learned a lot about personal finance from my boy Caleb Hammer. Stuart says, wow, a lot today. Getting my coffee and popcorn. Heck yeah. And I'm interested to hear your takes because some of you have run the Curse of Strahd. I have not, guys. I've never even opened the Curse of Strahd book because I don't own it. I haven't bought a single 5e supplement. And here's why. I have a whole box of 3e supplements that I acquired during my 20s and 30s. I have spent a small fortune on D&D supplements, and I've had many generous people gift them to me over the years, people who are playing in my games, other GMs who are quitting 3e to go to 5e. You may not know this. I resisted 5e for like 2 full years. I was still running 3rd edition. And then my group bought me the 5e books. So they were like, we want you to run this for us. This is how I got into 3rd edition. Originally, I refused to run D&D. I was running homebrew. But then my players bought me, or no, my players did mine for me. One of my best friends gave me the 3rd edition books. And then my players said, what, you have the books? Run D&D. They put on a formal protest, guys. They were like, Josh, run D&D. Stop it with the homebrew. The homebrew was good, but they wanted D&D. And then once I got into it, I was addicted, guys. Dirty Sock says, fun challenge. Vampire is a gelatinous cube, eternally regenerating, eternally feeding. When the gelatinous cube is defeated, you have to fight the vampire. That is a twist. That's like a fever dream twist. Surfer Dude says, I will say my favorite rendition of vampires was from 2004 Van Helsing movie. Oh, I didn't include the Van Helsing movie. I included Underworld because we all know that Kate Beckinsale's number one vampire appearance was in Underworld, right? That's how I don't equate Van Helsing, although Hugh Jackman was in Van Helsing. I think we have to include Van Helsing. All right. We're going to also cover Van Helsing. Actually good catch, Surfer Dude. Good catch. T-Dog says, never ran Curse, but ran a story similar and had the main villain be suspenseful, but not the main enemy. The actual villain was the cart driver that tricked them there. That's artsy. I'm just gonna say right now. That's like when you go to the coffee shop and they start poetry slamming, guys. We're getting artsy out here. That's like some that's like something a Leonardo DiCaprio movie would do that, right? Not hating, I'm just saying. Stewart says Kate Beckinsale, yes, loved Underworld, but mostly because of her and the way they portrayed the werewolves. Yes, they portrayed werewolves really good. Kate Beckinsale was extremely sexy in those movies. High key set the bar for goth chicks for me in my life. Had a lot of goth chick. I've had a lot of goth chick interest, really into those alt girls. And Kate Beckinsale, pretty much, I mean, she was the gold standard. If you grew up in the early 2000s, you were watching movies in the early 2000s. She set the tone. She like set the bar for the goth chicks, guys. Crossheart says, I love running vampires. I have a vampire lieutenant for the BBG in my campaign. And next session, my players are encountering a starved vampire spawn. Yes, I love it. All right. All right, guys, it's time to get into it. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button. I appreciate all of you. We're going to start off with the 5e. We're going to start off with the 5e vampires, okay? I'm going to read a little bit from this, but we're going to discuss it. We've got a lot to go over today. There's a part of me that worries that I have too much prepared, but what happens often is I run out of material halfway through the live stream. So I prepared more today because I want to run an hour live stream. This is my goal. Another thing, one of the best love scenes in any movie ever was in that second movie when Kate Beckinsale, she had romantic interlude with the vampire guy, the hybrid dude. I can't remember what his name was. And then her eyes go blue, like her blue eyes dilate, vampire eyes, very sexy. Crossheart says typical DM struggles. Yeah, it is typical DM struggles. Corbin, was that his name? Corbin, was he the hybrid vampire she fell in love with? I feel like it wasn't Corbin. I feel like it was like Mark. I don't know. I don't remember what his name was. I could find out. But I want I actually am more interested. Let's roll with Corbin because I don't actually know what his name was. All right. Vampires. Awakened to an endless night, vampires hunger for the life they have lost and sate that hunger by drinking the blood of the living. Vampires abhor sunlight, for as touch burns them. They never cast shadows or reflections, and any vampire wishing to move unnoticed among the living keeps to the darkness and far from reflective surfaces. This is actually really good. That's that's a pretty comprehensive description. Dark desires. Michael Corvin. Michael, that's what it was. Michael Corvinus. Yes, it was Michael. I remember now. You're right about that. Dark desires. Whether or not a vampire retains any memories from his former life, its emotional attachments wither as once per feelings become twisted by undeath. Love turns into hungry obsession while friendship becomes bitter jealousy. In place of emotion, vampires pursue physical symbols of what they crave, so that a vampire seeking love might fixate on a young beauty. A child might become an object of fascination for a vampire obsessed with youth and potential. Others surround themselves with art, books, or sinister items such as torture devices or trophies from creatures they have killed. Okay, all right. So Dark desires. Now we go to born from death. Most of a vampire's victims become vampire spawn, ravenous creatures with the vampire's hunger for blood, but under the control of the vampire that created them. If a true vampire allows a spawn to draw blood from its own body, the spawn transforms into a true vampire, no longer under its master's control. Few vampires are willing to relinquish their control in this manner. Vampire spawn become free-willed when the creator dies. Ooh, okay. So this is like incentive for them to kill their creator, actually. That's what my mind goes to. Chains to the grave. Every vampire remains bound to its coffin, crypt, or grave site, where it must rest by day. If a vampire didn't receive a formal burial, it must lie beneath a foot of earth at the place of its transition to undeath. A vampire can move its place of burial by transporting its coffin or a significant amount of grave dirt to another location. Some vampires set up multiple resting places this way. And then we have undead nature. Neither a vampire nor a vampire spawn requires air. Okay. There's a note here in the monster manual about player characters as vampires. Do you let players play vampires in your games? Drop a comment and let me know. Sorry, my nose is running a little bit. I got the head cold slightly. There's a note here about Strahd too, even in 2014, but I'm not going to read that because I don't even know what's going on. And you guys probably know more about that than me. We're talking about a vampire's lair. I feel like this is important. We're going to talk about the vampire lair. A vampire chooses a grand yet defensible location for its lair, such as a castle, fortified manor, or walled abbey. It hides its coffin in an underground crypt or vault, guarded by vampire spawn or other loyal creatures of the night. This makes me think that we have to also include interview with a vampire in our rankings. We also need to do interview with a vampire, and then please rework all rankings. I'm getting AI to help me with these rankings. Okay. Now, regional effects. This actually surprised me. I forgot about this when I was looking into 5e again. And when I got back into it, I realized, you know what? 5e wasn't as bad as I thought. It did better than I thought it did. Okay. Now, Bert says yes to allowing players to play vampires. Interesting. Seems very powerful to me, but also they have tremendous drawbacks. It could really hinder the rest of the party unless everyone's playing a vampire. Surfer Dude says, haven't personally yet, but it would be interesting to do. Make it run like a warlock patron, perhaps. You could. The drawbacks, though, are a real thing. Bert says, but the only vampire I've ran for was in an evil campaign. That's a thing. Sometimes it's hard to mix good and evil characters. You have to have a very mature party to mix good and evil characters. A lot of times people actually get their feelings hurt when those two mix. I've had this happen many times. It's happened kind of recently in one of my paid games. Had a party split because of this. Literally started a new campaign because the party was splitting, and so we diverged the timeline into two different directions. Very interesting, but this is how it goes sometimes. Okay. Regional effects. The region surrounding vampires' lairs warped by the creature's unnatural presence, creating any of the following effects. Number one, there's noticeable increase in the populations of bats, rats, and wolves in the region. This is nice. Plants within 500 feet of the lair wither, and their stems and branches become twisted and thorny. Shadows cast within 500 feet of the lair seem abnormally gaunt and sometimes move as though alive. And a creeping fog clings to the ground within 500 feet of the vampire's lair. The fog occasionally takes eerie forms, such as grasping claws and writhing serpents. If the vampire is destroyed, these effects end after 2d6 days. Make sure to roll to make sure you know how many days it's been, that the effects go away. Okay, and then we have the vampire stat block, which, I mean, I don't know. I actually don't know if I should go all through the stat block, but. And then we have Von Strahd's lair over here, I think is what this is. Okay, so they're a shape changer. They have legendary resistance. They have misty escape. They can regenerate, regain 20 hit points at the start of its turn if it has at least 1 hit point and isn't in sunlight, right? Or running holy water. They have spider climb, right? It's weird to say spider climb in reference to vampires. It's more like they can climb on walls, but it is spider climb. Vampire weaknesses. They have the following flaws, according to the 5e books. Forbiddance. The vampire can't enter a residence without an invitation from one of the occupants. This is very on theme. We're going to talk about this here in a little bit. Harmed by running water. The vampire takes 20 acid damage if it ends its turn in running water. This is also very on theme, actually. Stake to the heart. If a piercing weapon made of wood is driven into the vampire's heart while the vampire is incapacitated in its resting place, the vampire is paralyzed until the stake is removed. This is interesting. This doesn't kill it, it just paralyzes it. This is not necessarily on theme with traditional vampire lore. And then we have sunlight hypersensitivity. The vampire takes 20 radiant damage when it starts its turn in sunlight. While in sunlight, it has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. Little leeway given there, right? Sort of like a true blood like vampire, but there are vampires in other settings that definitely are more sensitive to sunlight. Okay. It can take a multi-attack, unarmed strike, bat, a bite. It can try to bite. It can charm. Children of the Night, it can do this once per day. The vampire magically calls 2d4 swarms of bats or rats, provided the sun isn't up, right? And then we have legendary actions. It can move its speed without provoking opportunity attacks, has an unarmed strike as a legendary action, or it can bite, which costs 2 actions. And then, of course, there's the vampire spawn stat block, which is a little weaker than the vampire stat block. But Kronsart says, didn't healing spells in older editions harm the vampire? Yes, in 3rd edition, any undead creature that got healing spells cast on it, healing spells acted like it inflict on the undead. That was a big thing in 3rd edition. So if you were facing undead, you wanted your good clerics around because they could do cure wounds on the vampire and deal direct damage to it. Yes, this was totally a thing in 3rd edition. I don't know about 4th edition, but in 3rd edition it was. All right. So we've established our baseline, right, for what vampires can do in 3rd edition. Pretty cool, pretty thematic. But there are some drawbacks, right? Mostly location based. They have to have their coffin, their lair. But this is very on point with the lore. Crossart says, but inflict wounds would heal. Yes, in 3rd edition, that's how you would heal undead, was inflict. In fact, new players, this was always fun, new D&D players who had never played D&D before, when they were fighting undead, they would go up there and be like, I cast inflict wounds, 3rd level, and everyone at the table would scream, no, stop it, because if they did it, they would heal the undead creature they were fighting. It was always a very funny thing. Anyway, okay, now, we're going to talk just a little bit about the 3rd edition vampire, which I know I talk a lot about how I like 3rd edition, but I'm going to be honest. I didn't like the 3rd edition vampire. I thought it was underdone. So I'm just going to talk about this for just a minute. We have vampire spawn. There isn't even a vampire like lord in the 3rd edition monster manual, like the original 3rd edition. In 3.5 there might have been, but I wasn't fancy enough for the 3.5 books. Only had the 3rd edition books. Okay. 3rd edition vampire spawns, they have a charm ability, okay? They're called undead creatures that come into being when vampires slay mortals. Like their creators, spawn remain bound to their coffins and to the soul of their graves. Vampire spawn appear just as they did in life, though their features are often hardened and feral with a predatory look. Vampire spawn speak common, so they have the charm ability, right? They have energy drain. Living creatures hit by a vampire spawn slam attack receive 1 negative level. This is different. Level drain in 3rd edition, okay? So Crossart says, Mikey B says, hey, Mikey B, welcome to the chat. What I liked about 3E was you could apply a vampire template to anything. Yes, you could. You absolutely could. Crossart says, even 5E vampires really feel underpowered. You really have to utilize their minions and lair. Yes, you do. And honestly, when a group gets a certain power level, they're not really a threat anymore. It's more like if the group doesn't know they're dealing with a vampire. This is when they're dangerous because it's like the secretive nature of it. Mikey B says, you want a vampire rogue? Slap on a template. Vampire dog template. Yes, vampire dogs rolling out. Okay, so But they have energy drain, which drains levels if you get hit. The fortitude save to remove the negative level is a DC 14. So you get to roll save, but if you get hit with it, man, level drain. And that was permanent, man. So that's what made vampires more dangerous in third edition. But I also wasn't a fan of level drain. I thought level drain was too mean, guys. Blood drain. A vampire spawn can suck blood from a living victim with his fangs by making a successful grapple check. If it pins the foe, it drains blood, inflicting 1d4 points of permanent constitution drain each round. Vampires, I wasn't a fan of vampires in third edition. I had my issues with them, but holy crap. Not only could they energy drain, but they could literally blood drain. They could literally drain your con levels, and it was permanent. 1d4 con level damage per round if they successfully grappled you. Never get grappled by a vampire. Surfer Dude says level drain is rough. Always been a big fan of stat drain, like a curse that can undo later. Yeah, I mean, there's probably ways to undo it, but you don't just heal from it naturally, right? Undead. They're immune to mind-influencing effects, poison, sleep paralysis, stunning, and disease, not subject to critical hits, subdual damage, ability damage, energy drain, or death from massive damage. Gaseous form. Okay, this is wild. As a standard action, a vampire spawn can assume gaseous form at will, as the spell cast by a 6th level sorcerer, but it can remain gaseous indefinitely and has a fly speed of 20 feet with perfect maneuverability. Okay. Crossheart says, same. I'm a fan of things like ghosts that reduce strength. Those are terrifying wounds. Yeah, like shades. Okay. They also had spider climb. They had fast healing, right? And then they had some skills. +4 racial bonus to bluff, hide, listen, move silently, search, sense motive, and spot checks. Okay. Repelling and slaying vampire spawn. Vampire spawn are equally vulnerable to attacks as slay vampires. For details, see the vampire entry in Appendix 3 templates. Oh, there's the vampire template. Only the spawn appears in the monster manual. Anyway, okay, so there we go for the third edition. Okay, guys. Now we're getting to the interesting, weird stuff. Okay. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about a couple different sets of lore for vampires and how they compare to the 5e, okay? All right. Now, here's what I'm going to go through these, okay? Let's start with baseline, the 5e vampire, okay? Now, I've used ChatGPT to help me formulate this. I think it seems pretty accurate to me. Let me know if it seems like there's anything missing, but I think it's pretty right, okay? So we're going with the baseline 5e vampire. This is our measuring stick, okay? A 5e vampire has a very recognizable kit. It can turn into a bat or mist, escape as mist, 0 hit points, regenerate 20 HP around, climb walls and ceilings, charm humanoids, create vampire spawn by draining a victim's maximum HP to 0, and call bats, rats, and wolves. It also has legendary resistance and legendary actions, which already puts it well above ordinary undead bruiser territory. Its destruction rules are a little slippery. In 5e, a wooden stake does not normally kill a full vampire. If it is incapacitated in its resting place and staked through the heart, it becomes paralyzed until the stake is removed. The vampire is destroyed if it drops to 0 hit points and cannot use Misty Escape, or if it fails to reach its resting place within 2 hours after escaping is missed. Sunlight and running water also shut off its regenerative abilities and deal automatic damage. Holy water and radiant damage do not instantly kill it, but they do suppress regeneration. So 5e's vampire is a combat boss with classic folklore restraints, but its finish it for real logic is more procedural than dramatic. Okay. Now, Mikey B says stat drain was always the lesser undead, while level drain is typically greater undead, like our friend vampire. Yes. Surfer Dude says, don't even need to actually hurt you. Reduce stats to 0 equals death. Yes. reduce, I think it was any one of them to 0 and you die. Don't even need to deal HP damage. Mikey B says to Surfer Dude, yeah, and stats aren't as heavily tied to character level like HP is. No, they're not. A D4 con damage stacks up real quick, right? Now, let's talk about Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula compared to 5e, okay? Now, where Dracula is stronger than 5e, Dracula has broader supernatural authority than the 5e vampire. In the novel, he is described as having the strength of many men, even specifically the strength of 20 men. He commands wolves, uses fog and mist as part of his presence and movement, lacks a reflection in mirrors, casts no shadow, and can take on other forms. He feels less like a stat block and more like a regional nightmare. Okay, where Dracula is weaker than or narrower than in 5e, he is less cleanly gamified as a skirmish boss. The novel gives him mythic powers, but not the neat 5e loop of legendary actions, HP regeneration numbers, spawn mechanics, or action economy. So at the table, 5e Dracula is often easier to run as a tactical threat, while Stoker's Dracula is easier to imagine as a campaign level curse lord. I think that's pretty accurate. So what actually stops or destroys Dracula, as per Bram Stoker's novel? Dracula's limitations are harsher and more folkloric than in the 5e version. He cannot enter a home at first without invitation, can cross running water only at limited tide conditions, is afflicted by garlic and sacred objects, and is bound up with coffin earth and resting places. The novel also describes concrete anti-vampire methods. A wild rose in the coffin can pin him there. A sacred bullet into the coffin can kill him. Staking, beheading, and burning the heart are all named solutions. And at the climax, he is finished by a throat cut plus a knife thrust into the heart. So this is what we're getting at for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bottom line versus 5e, Dracula is stronger in mythic breadth, weaker in tactical codification. He feels more supernatural and uncanny than the 5e vampire, but less balanced monster entry. If your complaint is that 5e vampires feel too contained, Dracula is great evidence for that, which is kind of my complaint. Okay, now let's move on and talk about True Blood. Mikey B says, Surfer Dude, oh, stats aren't as heavily tied. Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk about True Blood. Okay, where True Blood vampires are stronger than 5e. Suki, don't hurt me like you do, Suki. I love True Blood. I've watched every single episode. Flip Out says I'm late because I was cutting hella grass. Heck yeah, Flip Out. That was an awesome session the other night. I had a really good time. Flip Out is in my Wednesday night group. We were 2 players down, and yet the group did crazy awesome stuff. Appealed to Sylvanox, the chaotic god of the forest and the animals and beasts, for help in defeating a Dracorian army. Very, very awesome session. Very excited to continue this coming Wednesday. Anyway, good to see you, Flip Out. All right, let's talk about True Blood, where True Blood vampires are stronger than 5e. First of all, True Blood vampires are faster and more explosively superhuman in a cinematic sense. They are reanimated corpses with no heartbeat or need to breathe. They have accelerated healing, heightened senses, superhuman speed and strength, and the ability to glamour humans by eye contact and voice. Age also scales power upwards, so older vampires get significantly stronger and faster. Some unusual vampires gain extras, like telekinesis or special resistances. Okay, what True Blood vampires are weaker in than 5e? They are much more vulnerable to hard counters. Sunlight is catastrophic to them. Wood through the heart is usually an instant kill. Silver burns them, weakens them, and is routinely used to bind or incapacitate them. They do not have the same 5e mist away, maybe recover in your coffin safety net as a default rule, though some of them can fly, the older ones. What actually kills them? Sunlight can burn them to death. Wooden stakes or other wood piercing the heart usually produce true death. Silver is not normally the kill shot, but it is one of the best control tools because it burns, weakens, and restrains them. Bottom line versus 5e, how do they stand up? True Blood vampires are stronger in raw speed and visceral predation, but easier to hard counter than 5e vampires. They are more apex ambush monster, less sticky undead boss. I think this is pretty accurate. Okay, now let's talk about Underworld. Okay, how do Underworld vampires compare to 5e vampires? Now, Here's where underworld vampires are stronger than in 5e. First of all, underworld vampires are basically super soldier immortals. They are faster, more agile, more durable, and more overtly action heroic than 5e vampires. Their basic template includes enhanced strength, speed, agility, reflexes, endurance, durability, and accelerated healing. This is the most combat physics vampire on our list. Where underworld vampires are weaker than in 5e is this. They lose a lot of classic vampire weirdness. They're not built around gaze charm, spawn creation, bat mist, shapeshifting summons, invitation rules, or sacred item tension. So they lose all that folklore. They are more viral immortal predator than cursed aristocratic sorcerer, right? So what actually kills underworld vampires? Well, their big weakness is UV and sunlight, which burns and can incinerate them. They are also vulnerable to nightshade, which can kill weaker vampires and cripple stronger ones. Notably, they do not have the old mythic weaknesses to crosses, holy water, garlic, or wooden stakes. Here's the bottom line: underworld vampires versus 5e. Underworld vampires are stronger physically, but they're weaker from a folklore perspective. If 5e's vampire feels too Dracula, Underworld gives you the opposite: terrifying body, but thinner myth. But personally, I prefer the Dracula take. So while Underworld was a great movie, actually, I kind of prefer Dracula as a vampire to them. So anyway, that's where we go with that. Now, let's compare 5e vampires to second edition D&D vampires, AD&D vampires, right? This is way back in second edition. We're going way back. Okay. So this is where things get pretty nasty. I think second edition vampires may have been the nastiest. Here's where AD&D vampires were stronger. First of all, they were nastier in a way players immediately learned to fear. Their gaze charms victims with saving throw penalty. They drain 2 life energy levels on a hit. Weapons below +1 enchantments do nothing to them. They regenerate, and if reduced to 0, they become gaseous and flee to the coffin instead of truly dying. They are also immune to sleep, charm, hold person, poison, and paralysis, and they take only half damage from cold and electricity. Okay. What actually, where do AD&D vampires come in weaker than in 5e? They're not as action economy engineered as a 5e boss with legendary actions and resistance. But in practical play, they're usually scarier because level drain is so punishing and their defenses are less forgiving. Okay. Rotten Roger, hello, Rotten Roger, welcome to the chat. Yes, Crossheart in 1e healing spells cause damage and negative necrotic energy healed. To get update undead in 5e and make it easier, I would give undead the ability to cause X level of exhaustion. Yeah, that's fair. That's actually, it kind of accomplishes a similar thing, but it's not as nasty. Blue Rose Lion says almost all monsters fall to beheading, except zombies. Those you have to take out the brain. At least that's how I would run zombies. That is very folklorish. I would agree. Mikey B says, Rotten Rogers, they should definitely cause exhaustion. That would make 5e undead actually scary. Yes. Flipout says, does radiant damage do anything to D&D vampires? It does, but it doesn't insta-kill them. They take I think when they're exposed to sunlight, they take 20 points of damage. So if you're doing radiant damage, I think it would be damage plus 20. But let me double check. Do they have radiant vulnerability? That's the question. They have no vulnerabilities in 5e. They do have resistances to necrotic, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. Mikey B says vulnerable to radiant, maybe. They are not as per the 5e monster manual. Now, they may be in 5.5. Crossheart says, when I run vampires, I give them spell-like abilities that are on theme, like we talked about with dragons the other day. All the spells are necrotic or illusion-based. I think that's really cool. I think that they are usually probably going to be spellcasters, kind of like dragons. Anyway, so now, here's where we talk about AD&D vampires and what actually kills them. Okay, like 5e vampires, AD&D vampires can go gaseous and retreat to their coffin. If they cannot reach the coffin in time, they are truly destroyed. They're also bound by invitation rules, aversion to garlic and holy symbols, and coffin logic. Victims slain by their drain can become vampires themselves after burial, which makes them more infectious than 5e's already dangerous spawn mechanic. Bottom line, AD&D versus 5e vampires. AD&D vampires are more punishing and frankly more terrifying than 5e vampires. The big reason is not flashy powers. It is that their attacks do more campaign damage. Losing levels feels far worse than losing HP max until a long rest, right? Mikey B says, but they are not resistant to radiant, so at least it does full damage. Oh, totally. Plus, as per the rules, radiant, like they take damage from radiant. Like, let's see, where is it? Let me see here. If we go back here, there was something in here about how they suffer from radiant damage. Sunlight hypersensitivity. The vampire takes 20 radiant damage when it starts its turn in sunlight. While in sunlight, it has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. Now, that's not radiant damage sensitivity, but like if you're using the sunlight spell, then they would take extra radiant damage for it, right? Server Dude says, oh, if that's not canon, that'd be a great way to run it. Mikey B says, oh, definitely. Ravenloft was painful. You go in as a level 8 party, and one bad encounter puts the entire party below recommended level 6. Yes, I understand. All right, now let's talk about 4th edition vampires. How did they compare to 5e? Okay, let's talk about that. Okay, where 4e vampires were stronger than 5e vampires. Let's talk about that first. 4th edition vampire lords are strong on the classic package: immunity to disease and poison, necrotic resistance, regeneration, radiant vulnerability, blood drain, domination gaze, mist escape, spawn creation, and a bind to a resting place. That is very close to what people expect from an iconic vampire boss. I would agree. The 4e vampire class also adds a bunch of explicit tricks like dark vision, no need to breathe or age, sunlight damage, regeneration while bloodied, climbing, charming gaze, domineering gaze, bat form, gaseous form, and swarm-based shadow powers. Now, while I'm talking about this, I want someone to drop a comment. Let me know what you want me to talk about in tomorrow's live stream, because I'm looking for topics. First person to drop a topic I care at all about, that's what I'm going to make a live stream about tomorrow. So just letting you know. All right. Where is 4e weaker than 5e? 4e's player vampire is more curated and compartmentalized. It feels like a deliberately designed power package, not an eldritch horror who breaks the campaign. They can make it feel cleaner, but sometimes less mythically oppressive. Man, I don't want my vampires to not be mythically oppressive. I want them to be mythically oppressive, right? The sunlight weakness on the class is also very explicit and dangerous. Okay. What actually kills or cripples the 4e vampires? Okay. Radiant is the standard weakness. The 4e class vampire is vulnerable to radiant, takes sunlight damage if exposed without proper covering, is weakened by that exposure, and can be instantly destroyed if it drops too low from sunlight. The 4e vampire lord also has strong radiant vulnerability and resting place dependence. Okay. Carsart says, we don't talk about 4e. No. I didn't hate 4e. I only played it once. I never ran it. I played a paladin. I was happy with the build. I mean, but I'm more about a role play than the mechanics. I mean, I hardly knew half of what I was doing. I was just like smite. I'm not a real mechanics heavy player, though I do tend to be these days a little more so because I enjoy it. Okay, now here's some other stuff we got to talk about. Okay, we got to talk about Van Helsing. Okay. The cleanest Van Helsing version to include is the 2004 Van Helsing film Dracula, because the version gives you a very flashy, high contrast comparison point against 5e. So that's what we're going to talk about. In that movie's lore, Dracula is presented as the first and most powerful vampire, with powers like superhuman strength, speed, agility, healing, wall climbing, shapeshifting, and command over lesser vampires. He is also portrayed as unusually resistant to the normal vampire counter toolkit. What makes him especially useful for this conversation is this. He appears to bypass a lot of the classic vampire weaknesses, okay? The movie wiki summary specifically notes that Van Helsing tries silver and a cross and realizes Dracula is impervious to conventional vampire weaknesses, and multiple summaries of that version state that sunlight, holy water, garlic crosses, and silver stakes are not the real answer for that Dracula. The decisive weakness presented for him is werewolf venom, a werewolf attack, which is what makes him feel much more like a boss monster with a special kill condition than a standard folklore vampire. Is that true? I don't remember Van Helsing very well. This gives you a really sharp comparison against 5e vampires, because 5e vampires still care a lot about sunlight, running water, resting place logic, and regenerative suppression. Whereas Van Helsing Dracula is much more a mythic apex predator who shrugs off the usual anti-vampire kit. He's a good example of a vampire design that says, no, this thing is not just a spooky aristocrat. It's a nightmare raid boss, okay? Crossart says, potential topic, running different atmospheres, running a mystery, festival, siege, being hunted, etc. I like that. I like it. Let's do it. I'm going to make a note of that. I'll remember that. I'm going to grab this here, though, and copy and paste it because I want to make sure I don't lose it. Very, very good suggestion. Got to drop it in my list of topics here. I've got a topic list going again. Every once in a while, I make a topic list and it gets really big. And then at some point, halfway through, I kind of abandon it because I get onto other things. Surfer Dude says, yes, Van Helsing was a reincarnation of Dracula's former nemesis and turned into the alpha werewolf in order to absolutely dog on Dracula. Dracula went running so scared. Interesting. Rotten Roger says, topic, Jason from Halloween done in 5e form. That's funny. I'm going to put that on my topic list. That's very interesting. Jason from Halloween. I'm going to have to watch that movie. I'll watch it with my kids. We watch a lot of horror movies. Mikey B says, what's on your list? Maybe we can do a casual voter poll. These are the only two things on my list right now. Crossart says, new Discord poll. Flipout says, what about Marvel Dracula? I didn't know there was a Marvel Dracula. I'm going to have to check on that. I think we've got time. Marvel Dracula. Okay. AWOL Warrior says, Crossart. Oh, good suggestion. I have a siege coming up in my campaign. I'm actually in our Wednesday night group where Flipout's playing. I mean, there's kind of like it keeps threatening to be a siege, but it hasn't happened yet because the players keep thwarting the Dragonborn plans. All right. Now, we added Van Helsing here. Okay. We're going to talk about Interview with the Vampire. All right. Specifically, let's see here. Van Helsing. Okay, Interview with the Vampire, the Anne Rice vampires. Compared to 5e, Anne Rice vampires can become dramatically more powerful at high end. Their powers scale with age and blood potency. Telepathy, hypnotic influence, telekinesis, eventually flight through the cloud gift, and pyrokinetic destruction through the fire gift all push them into immortal psychic aristocrat territory. Their biggest recurring weaknesses are sunlight and fire, though older vampires can become more resistant over time. This is one of the few vampire models on your list that can move from dangerous predator to near demigod without changing species. Okay. Now, with all that being said, we're going to look over the official rankings. Okay. Here's the official rankings. AWOL Warrior says, good suggestion. Oh, Mikey B says, underwater adventures campaigns. Add that to different atmosphere suggestions. I'll add that to the list. I ran a whole underwater arc one time. Metal. It was metal AF. One of the funnest arcs I've ever run. Very, very fun. I would love to talk about that. All right. So here's the reworked rankings. Here's the raw combat danger in compared to 5e when we combine all 7 of these options. Number 1, the Anne Rice high-end vampires from Interview with the Vampire. Definitely the most deadly. Number 2, the Van Helsing Dracula. Definitely more powerful. Number 3, 2nd edition D&D vampires. Number 4, underworld vampires. Number 5, we have our 5e vampire. And then we have 4e vampire lord. We have true blood vampires coming in after. That surprises me, but they are so susceptible to the weaknesses. And then we have coming in at number 7, last place, Stoker's Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, as the weakest in terms of raw combat danger. Mikey Beast has played an underwater campaign back in 2E days. The 3D combat aspects was cool, but challenging with miniatures. It would be challenging, yeah. We always use those our little clear dice, our little clear dice containers to show vertical distance. So it's like we'd stack 2 of them, and that would be 60 feet. One of them was 30 feet. Crossart says, crap to your vampire Twilight. I legitimately specifically thought about Twilight and I didn't include it. Oh my God. Okay. Let's actually work. I don't even, let's talk about Twilight. Growth. Okay. Let's add Twilight to this and update total rankings. Oh my God. Do we have to? Mikey B says, I understand. I feel your pain. What? Twilight. Still a better love story than Twilight. This live stream chat is still a better love story than Twilight. Surfer Deuce's honorable mention, Blade Universe vampires, specifically the mutant vampires. Oh, Blade. You're right. Blade is an honorable mention. Crossroads says, vampire question. How would you run a player being infected and turned into a vampire? That's a good question. Okay. If a player is going to play a vampire, I'm basically going to, they're going to have to roleplay all the restrictions. It would be so hard to have one player be a vampire in a group of players because they would hold them. In some ways, they'd be so useful, but in some ways, they would hold up the party. It would be so hard to keep that party together. Okay. Let's talk about Twilight. In Twilight, vampires have extreme speed, strength, and durability, venomous bites, and unusually few classic weaknesses. They also have Robert Pattinson on their side, right? Sunlight does not harm them, and classic vampire counters like crosses, garlic, silver stakes, and invitation rules do not apply. The big catch is that they're very hard to destroy permanently. The standard kill method is to dismember them and burn the remains before they can reassemble. That means Twilight vampires jump way up in any rankings about durability or how hard they are to finish off, even if they are not the broadest occult casters on the list. By contrast, the 5e vampire still has a strong boss kit with regeneration, charm, bat mist forms, children of the night, and misty escape, but it is much more hemmed in by sunlight, running water, invitation rules, and resting place logic. Now, let's talk about the Blade movies, vampires, and redo the rankings. Okay, we're adding Blade because you have to add Blade. I can't believe I forgot about that. Dishonor in my home, dishonor on my children, that I forgot about Blade. Wesley Snipes deserves better. Mikey B says, I would require the PC to have a coffin, so the party would have to carry them around 100%. And that would be the fun thing. Flip Out says, that happened to me. My sorcerer became a vampire just recently. Ooh, do you have to carry a coffin around, Flip Out? Is your GM making you carry around a coffin? Crossheart says the quest becomes curing the player or leaning to accept the change, and would the player turn on their companions? I feel like any campaign where it's like the quest is to cure the player, you'd be really lucky if everyone else bought into that. More likely, the rest of your group would use you for your benefits, and then when you became inconvenient, they just leave you behind. That's what happened. Mikey, Rotten Roger says, Mikey, go the Saberhagen method. They put a Ziploc bag of dirt into their clothing. Munchkin. That's what we call being a munchkin. Mikey B says, that would be fun. I can picture the party walking into a village like a bunch of pallbearers. That would be metal. Hunter Wolf says, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen vampire. Oh, I forgot about that. Even now that you mention that, did the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen have a vampire? I don't even remember. Was it Dracula? Okay. Here we go. We're going to talk about Blade, okay? Let's see. Blade. Okay, Blade included. Wait a minute. Blade vampires compared to 5e. Here we go. Compared to the 5e vampire, Blade movie vampires are usually more physically aggressive and faster, but often less broad in a cult tool set. In the Blade film lore, vampires have superhuman strength, speed, agility, reflexes, healing, heightened senses, and the ability to turn humans through bites or blood infection. They also suffer from the thirst, meaning blood dependency is a core biological weakness, not just flavor. Their classic vulnerabilities are still active. Sunlight, UV, silver, garlic, and EDTA, anticoagulant, are all established anti-vampire tools in that franchise. Some specialized strains break parts in that rule set, like the Reapers, who are resistant to several normal anti-vampire measures, but still vulnerable to sunlight, and La Magra enhanced Deacon Frost, who becomes immune to silver, sunlight, and garlic, but can still be brought down by massive EDTA exposure. Okay. So what makes Blade vampires feel like this? That makes Blade vampires feel like this: more dangerous and direct action scenes than 5e vampires, less weird and folkloric than Dracula, less campaign curse lord than 5e, much more vulnerable to anti-vampire tech and prepared hunters than 5e vampires. Okay, so now let's talk about let's compare the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen vampire, whose name is, let's see, someone dropped her name literally. It was the girl, the woman member, Mina Harker. Compare this to 5e. And let's create a master ranking list of sheer power level, because we want to take them all into account as we close it out. That's what we're going to do. Okay. It's thinking about it. Okay. Using ChatGPT for this. This is very useful because I don't know all this lore. Okay. There's one important trapdoor here. It says, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Mina Harker depends heavily on which version you mean. In the 2003 film, Mina is a full vampire with immortality, superhuman strength, regeneration, and bat swarm transformation. In the Alan Moore comics, she is generally presented much more ambiguously, with some sources summarizing her as having only partial or limited vampiric traits, and at least one more related discussion claiming he did not intend her to have full vampire powers. So, okay, here we go. We're going to go through this. Okay, Lena Harker versus the 5e vampire. Okay, Penny Dreadful. I knew someone was going to say that. As soon as I read this, I thought about Penny Dreadful. Hunter Wolf said it. We have to add Penny Dreadful. Yeah, and I also think Penny Dreadful has Dracula. Okay, so here's Mina Harker, where Mina Harker is stronger than the 5e vampire. Film Mina gets a very slick action horror kit. Immortality, superhuman strength, rapid healing, and shapeshifting into a swarm of bats, plus fight via that swarm form. She also appears much less constrained by classic folklore baggage than many vampires. Compared to the 5e vampire, Mina feels more agile and cinematic, less burdened by old school vampire rules, and then more like a supernatural assassin than a gothic boss monster. Okay. Where is 5e stronger than Mina? A 5e vampire still has a broader D&D boss toolkit: regeneration, spider climb, charm, children of the night, shape changing, spawn creation, legendary resistance, legendary actions, and the very annoying misty escape coffin survival loop. Mina's film kit is scary, but it is narrower and less campaign boss engineered than a 5e vampire stat block. Weaknesses and kill logic. This is where Mina gets slippery. Film summaries emphasize that she is immortal and cannot be killed by conventional weapons, but the available summaries do not lay out as clean a rule grid as 5e's sunlight, running water, or resting place logic. 5e vampires, by contrast, have very illicit defeat rules. Sunlight and running water damage them and shut off regeneration. Radiant or holy water suppress regeneration. And if they hit 0 hit points, they must misform back to the resting place or be destroyed. So, blunt comparison. Mina Harker is probably weaker than a full 5e vampire in total package, but stronger in style, mobility, and cool factor. Of course, cool factor. She feels like a deadly elite vampire operative. The 5e vampire feels like a more complete boss. Okay. Now we have to add Penny Dreadful. Please add Penny Dreadful as per the show vampires to this list. Compare to 5e, and then give us a new overarching power list rank. Okay. Including all the vampires we've discussed, ranked in overall power order. Okay, here we go. Boom. Hunter Wolf said it. I thought about it. Hunter Wolf said it. We have to add the Penny Dreadful vampire stuff. Surfer Dude says, I feel like the Reaper variant vampires from Blade were really cool and underutilized. Granted, I never read the comics. I also did not read the comics, but I did watch all the movies. Craving Phoenix says, what about the vampires from Van Helsing, the TV show? Though they're also kind of like zombies. Oh, the TV show Van Helsing? We did not talk about that, but we did talk about the movie version of Van Helsing earlier. If you weren't here for that, we did talk about that already. And we're about to cover it again, so stay tuned. Mikey B says, Mina Harker equals 3E vampire template applied to a rogue assassin. Yeah, actually, you might be right. Crossheart says a lot more vampires than I was aware of. Oh, yeah, there's a lot. Crossheart says, anyone else read or watched Noblessa? Noblesse? I don't know. I don't know what that is, actually. All right, here we go. Final iteration, and then we're going to do the final power rankings, total power rankings. Penny Dreadful vampires versus 5e. In 5e, the vampire is very polished boss chassis. It has all the stuff we've already talked about this, all of its abilities and stuff. It's checked by sunlight, running water, invitation rules, coffin logic, etc. In Penny Dreadful, vampires have a hierarchy. Dracula is the original vampire and progenitor, while master vampires can create lesser vampires. The show's vampire lore gives them superhuman strength, agility, endurance, immortality, mind control, and some shape-shifting, with Dracula specifically able to assume human guises and transform into green mist. The setting also gives them a nasty structural trait. If a master vampire dies, all the infected created by that master immediately die as well. The listed weaknesses are more direct than 5e in one sense. Grievous damage to the brain or heart can kill them. Crucifixes have a harmful effect, and Dracula can walk in sunlight without visible discomfort, though it is unclear whether that applies to all vampires or only him. Okay, here's the blunt comparison. 5e vampires are stronger as a tabletop boss stat block. Penny Dreadful Dracula is stronger as a mythic campaign villain. Penny Dreadful master vampires are scarier socially and hierarchically than 5e vampires because they feel like the tip of an apocalyptic bloodline rather than one encounter. 5e is harder to finish in a normal fight loop because the Misty escape plus resting place recovery. Penny Dreadful vampires can be killed more directly by catastrophic damage to the heart or brain, though Dracula's broader myths status muddies that at the very top end. Okay, now here we go. Full updated master ranking list in power order. Here we go. Starting at number 1, Anne Rice's high-end vampires from Interview with the Vampire. At the top end, Anne Rice vampires gain powers like telepathy, telekinesis, the cloud gift for flight, and the fire gift, and older vampires being vastly more dangerous than younger ones. That gives them the biggest overall ceiling on the list. So they're the most powerful. Number 2, Twilight vampires. They're absurdly strong and durable, unharmed by sunlight, crosses, garlic, holy water, silver, and stakes, and the known kill method is to dismember them and burn the remains before they reassemble. In pure durability, they're monsters. Number 3, the Van Helsing Dracula from the 2004 movie. He fits the special condition Apex boss lane. In our earlier comparison, the key thing was that he is framed as superior to normal anti-vampire counters and requires a very particular answer, which makes him feel more like a raid boss than a standard vampire, okay? Number 4, we have the Penny Dreadful Dracula, the top master vampire in the show. Dracula is the progenitor of the entire line, millennia old, superhumanly strong and fast, capable of shapeshifting and mind control, and his union with Vanessa is framed as world-ending apocalypse fuel. That pushes him above most normal vampire lord versions, even though the setting is less game stat explicit than 5e, okay? Number 5, we have the 2nd edition D&D vampire. Still one of the nastiest game versions because of level drain, magic weapon requirements, regeneration, and coffin escape logic. In practical tabletop fear factor, these are vicious, Number 6, we have the blade vampires. Extremely dangerous, direct combat predators, but their setting also hands hunters strong counters like UV, silver, garlic, and EDTA, which keeps them below the near unstoppable top tier. Number 7, we have underworld vampires. Superhumanly strong, fast, agile, durable, and regenerative, but narrower in occult weirdness and still very vulnerable to UV. They're a terrifying action monster, just not as broad or slippery as the upper tiers. Next, we have the 5e vampire. A very strong all around package: regeneration, charm, summons, shape change, spidey climb, legendary resistance, and misty escape make it an excellent boss monster. It lands here because several other versions are either harder to kill, broader in powers, or more punishing. Okay. Um, Next, we have number 9, the fourth edition D&D vampire, especially the Vampire Lord. Very close to 5e in overall feel, and in some ways more overtly vampire themed in how its powers are packaged, but still not as overwhelming as the monsters above. Okay. Then we have number 10, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen's Mina Harker, the film version. Strong, fast, regenerative, immortal, and stylish, but more like an elite vampire operative than a setting defining apex predator. Next, we come in at number 11, True Blood vampires. Very dangerous predators with glamour and superhuman physicality, but sunlight silver and wood through the heart style counters are hard checks, which drags their overall rank down compared to the more absurd variants. Okay. And then we have number 12 on the list. This is crazy to me: Stoker's Dracula, the original Bram Stoker's Dracula, which proves power creep is real and it crosses all genres. This one needs an asterisk. In Mythic Presence, he ranks much higher, but in overall fight style power ranking, we put him lower because he is less combat monster and more regional supernatural catastrophe. In other words, lower in dual ranking, higher in narrative aura. So he aura farms like a boss, but combatively speaking, he's not as formidable. Okay. Okay, we got some comments here. Let's see. I've got to catch up on these. Rotten Roger says, for fun, do comedy vampires Leslie Nielsen Dracula and Loving It, or George Hamilton and Love It First Bite. I love those, but I'm gonna leave our rankings there because we've come up on an hour and we're about to be done. But good suggestions. It would be funny to see that, and sometimes they may actually be relevant, because sometimes comedy characters can be very scary. Crossart says it's a vampire versus werewolf manhwa. Surfer Dude says honorable mention 1922 films Nastafaru. Yes, honorable mention. Didn't even think of that. Hunter Wolf says noblesse. I think that you're correcting my probably bad grammar and enunciation of that word. Thank you. Craving Phoenix says, what about Interview with a Vampire? They seem more durable as well. We did cover Interview with a Vampire. That was in our final rankings. Surfer Dude says, would we consider Weeping Angels a form of vampire? I say no, but we should do a whole live stream about Doctor Who, because Doctor Who is amazing. And there's actually surprisingly cool lore to pull from it. Mikey B says, George Hamilton is the best vampire. Crossheart says Twilight vamps equal overpowered. Overpowered, yes. And just Twilight, man, it's so cringe comes to mind. Mikey B says, we didn't do Barnabas from Dark Shadows. We did not. Also an honorable mention. Blue Rose Lion says, which Dark Shadows? The original TV show or the remake? There is a big difference. There usually is. Mikey B says, indeed. Crossheart says, my campaign's vampire desires to create life to challenge the gods. He creates monsters, mimics, has multiple wives, and seeks ways around the curse of unlife. Nice. Crossheart, where would you put your vampire lord on the list of our 12 ranked vampire power sets here? Where would you put it? I would love to hear it. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for taking part in this live stream with me. This was a really fun one. Again, let me know, like, afterwards, drop in down in the Discord. If you haven't joined the Discord, do it. Links in the description. Drop in. Let me know what you'd like to see for future live streams. We've already got some great ideas lined up. I appreciate everyone's ideas. Everyone, Crossdress is fairly low. He's just a lieutenant. Oh, okay. So he's starting his boss arc, but he hasn't quite gotten there. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming by. I really had fun talking with you today. Roll some D100s for me at your next game, everyone. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button. Leave me some YouTube love. Help me to grow the channel. We've got to get this channel growing, get more attention, get that just get the whole marketing going stronger. Very pumped about this, really excited about it. And of course, if you want to play in one of my games, check my start playing listings in the description, guys. I appreciate you all. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you awesome people on the next one.